beyond our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today.
Oh, my goodness.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
Gonna go up. Can't do much right now. Russia's responsible.
Hollywood, the establishment, the mainline churches, the major corporations, I mean, they are on another planet.
So are you arguing for throwing out the Constitution? Should the Constitution be thrown out? What do we do? Is it a living document? Or is it a sacred document?
It's certainly not sacred, all right? Let's start there. The Constitution is kind of trash.
Do you think is a viable figure that Gaia, that the planet can sustain?
I would guess, living the way we do, not more than 1 billion, probably less.
Such is going to be the level of misery and panic across the world that there are bound to be the most cataclysmic conflicts, wars, struggles, simply for survival.
Well, again, whenever events like that come along, when there's huge floods, famines, there's a certain amount of struggling, but there's also an awful lot of good comes from it. When confronted like that, ordinary people show extraordinary heroism and helpfulness towards others, as well as being looters and vandals and so on. It's just a thoroughly disturbing thing.
I remember a time of chaos, ruined dreams, this wasted land. But most of all, I remember the road warrior, the man we called Max. To understand who he was, you have to go back to another time, when the world was powered by the black fuel, and the desert sprouted great cities of pipe and steel. For reasons long forgotten, two mighty warrior tribes went to war, and touched off a blaze which engulfed them all. Without fuel, they were nothing. They built a house of straw. The thundering machine sputtered and stopped. Their world crumbled. The cities exploded. A whirlwind of looting. A firestorm of fear. Men began to feed on men. On the roads, it was a white-line nightmare. Only those mobile enough to scavenge, brutal enough to pillage, would survive. The gangs took over the highways, ready to wage war for a tank of juice.
The chirping agents of the New World Order are mindlessly and relentlessly demanding a no-fly zone.
Over the past few days, there have been growing calls for the United States and NATO to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
This airspace safety is something that I think the people of Ukraine would see as extremely important for their freedom of movement and ability to get to safety.
With forces battling on the ground, Ukraine is begging the U.S. and its allies for more firepower in the sky. Now the Biden administration is negotiating with Poland to give Ukraine its old Soviet-made MiG fighter jets and replace them with U.S.-made F-16s.
NATO has said none of its 30 members are willing to set up a no-fly zone. President Biden has been very clear he has no interest in that or combat troops. But what more can the United States do here if, for instance, the Polish government, a NATO member, wants to send fighter jets? Does that get a green light from the U.S., or are you afraid that that will escalate tension?
No, that gets a green light. In fact, we're talking with our Polish friends right now.
As a passive public allows the fire to be stoked, there can only be one result if a no-fly zone is authorized. The acceleration of World War III, followed by a very good possibility of global thermonuclear war.
Shall we play a game?
How about global thermonuclear war?
Which side do you want?
If the talking head idiots succeed with their petition for a no-fly zone, a 24-hour airborne warning and control system long-range radar surveillance and control center for air defense, known as AWACS, would need to be protected by NATO's Air Force, which would quickly cause Allied fighter jets to engage Russian fighter jets.
Russia's Max Air Show, held every 2 years at an old flight test center outside of Moscow, is more than just a chance for Russian pilots to show off their skills. It's an important forum for Russia's aerospace industry to entice foreign buyers and to impress the boss with their latest creations. This year, aircraft manufacturer Sukhoi had a big announcement: a design for a brand new stealth fighter jet.
And forced a NATO attack on Russian anti-aircraft systems in order to protect AWACS.
Are you and your colleagues now more open to a no-fly zone?
So basically, a no-fly zone, if people understood what it means World War III. It means starting World War III. So I think there are a lot of things we can do to help Ukraine protect itself, both from airstrikes and missile strikes. But I think that people need to understand what a no-fly zone means. It's not some rule you pass that everybody has to oblige by. It's the willingness to shoot down the aircrafts of the Russian Federation, which is basically the beginning of World War III.
That would be the point of no return. The globalists would be safe in their massive bunkers. And according to Putin's posturing, China's backing, and Russia's protocols, Putin says, look, if these anti-ballistic missiles are placed in Eastern Europe, if those missiles are placed on water, patrolling the Mediterranean and the northern seas, and in Alaska, almost the whole Russian territory would be encircled by these systems. As you can see, that is another great strategic mistake by our partners, because all these actions are going to be adequately answered by Russia. A nuclear offensive would be imminent. John Bound reporting.
For years now, Russia has made verifiable claims that the US is running secret biological weapons labs around their borders. And while Western media now claims this to be misinformation, back in 2013, they reported on it. While the United States and Murder Incorporated have been waging illegal wars all across the world in the name of democracy, Russia has been quietly selling energy and minding their own business. And according to National Geographic, this was the reason why the Pentagon was building these bioweapons labs in the first place, because Russia was entirely quiet on the subject, and the US wanted to get ahead of them. The initial biolab in Kazakhstan was built by the US for $100 million to store high-risk diseases such as plague and anthrax, and was hoping to attract scientists who might otherwise create biological weapons of mass destruction for someone else, in order to keep the world safe. The US has since built several labs in Kazakhstan. Most recently, a biosafety level 4 lab to be completed in early 2022. As early as 2004, the Pentagon's Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, began creating a network of biolabs for infectious diseases in Uzbekistan. And within a few years after operations began, outbreaks of unknown diseases were reported in the same areas as the labs. In Georgia, leaked documents show that the U.S. Embassy has been transporting deadly pathogens and human blood as diplomatic cargo, in a scheme where private U.S. contractors working for 3 different U.S. biolabs have been given diplomatic immunity to do so. Shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine, At War Clandestine released a video with maps of U.S. biolabs matching up with maps of the recent attack.
suggesting that Russia was securing these top-secret biolabs. Western media claims this is false, but fails to debunk it. And once the video goes viral, the US Embassy in Ukraine is caught deleting evidence of these labs from their website. But not before an independent journalist was able to copy documents showing 11 Ukrainian biolabs funded by the Pentagon. The Russian embassy to Bosnia has accused the US of filling Ukraine with biolabs, which were very possibly used to study methods for destroying the Russian people at the genetic level. And we now know that these so-called mRNA vaccines are destroying people at the genetic level. We now officially know that COVID-19 is a man-made bioweapon. We know that it was funded by elements of the NIH and Peter Daszak's EcoHealth Alliance. We know that it was made in Wuhan, China. And so, what isn't threatening about the US encircling Russia with top-secret biolabs? And who on earth thinks it's a coincidence that everyone involved in the United Nations Great Reset are now the Ukraine's greatest allies of all time? The mercenaries and war profiteers in America are getting excited about making short-term profits off the dead. But the only ones who will benefit from this war are the crooks at the top, who have been caught committing the most heinous crime against humanity in all of recorded history. And the only righteous way out of this is to hold these crooks accountable. This is Greg Reese.
Where has Dr. Fauci gone?
Moderna is on emergency use authorization. The Pfizer is an emergency use authorization. And the J&J is an emergency use authorization.
All of a sudden, the fame-addicted dictator has disappeared. Could it have something to do with the 55,000-page set of documents recently released by the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, revealing to the public the data Pfizer submitted to the FDA from its clinical trials in support of a COVID-19 license? A big blow to the New World Order pandemic after U.S. District Judge Mark T. Pittmans denied the request from the FDA to suppress the data for the next 75 years, which the agency claimed was necessary, in part because of its limited resources.
I have frequently said, we're going to lead with the science. Science is going to be the foundation of everything we do. That is entirely true. I think public heard that as science is foolproof. Science is black and white. Science is immediate and we get the answer and then we, make the decision based on the answer. And the truth is, science is gray. And science is not always immediate. And sometimes it takes months and years to actually find out the answer. But you have to make, decisions in a pandemic before you have that answer.
A 38-page report included in the documents features an appendix titled List of Adverse Events of Special Interest, listing 1,291 different adverse events following. The list includes acute kidney injury, acute flaccid myelitis, anti-sperm antibody positive, brainstem embolism, brainstem thrombosis, cardiac arrest, cardiac failure, cardiogenic shock, death neonatal, deep vein thrombosis, encephalitis brainstem, front lobe epilepsy, pneumonia, stillbirth, tachycardia, temporal lobe epilepsy, and vertebral artery thrombosis among the 1,291 medical conditions following.
It seems to indicate a break in the veil that may allow legal action basically due to fraud and concealment of these risks from the general public. This is why you have not been able to have full informed consent, is they've hidden all this information from you, and they've used all of the propaganda and censorship tools, which you're about to cover, and paid media to keep all this information from you and spin it so that you think that the left is the right and the up and the down is the up and the moon is made of green cheese.
I'm an epidemiologist, and people have asked me, Dr. McCullough, are the actually causing the deaths? The epidemiological construct that we have to go through is called the Bradford Hill tenets of causality. So the first question is it a large signal? Is it a large epidemiologic signal? And I tell you, it's astronomical. All the combined in the United States per year, it's no more than 150 deaths, not temporally related. Here we're at over 21,000 deaths. So clearly it's a massive signal, number one. Number two, is there a dangerous mechanism of action? The answer is yes. Frankly, we know that have a dangerous mechanism of action. They install production of the spike protein. The spike protein is what makes the respiratory infection lethal. And it follows that in some people, excessive production of the spike protein in a vulnerable person would be lethal after. The third criteria is it internally consistent? Are there other conditions that are now acknowledged that they themselves could be fatal? And the answer is sure. With myocarditis, our FDA agrees, all the regulatory experts agree that cause myocarditis. Can it be fatal? Yes. Have there been fatal cases published? Yes. There's over 1,000 peer-reviewed papers published on fatal and non-fatal outcomes. So that criteria is met. It is beyond any shadow of a doubt that the are causing large numbers of deaths. It's unequivocal. It is unassailable. Those conclusions, and I'm a card-carrying epidemiologist, I'm telling you, are causing large numbers of deaths.
Maybe Dr. Fauci can crawl out of his hole and explain what he knew about the massive list of injuries that he had hoped would only be released long after he was gone. John Bound reporting.